Hey there, and welcome to Boring History for Sleep, the channel where we take the most mundane, overlooked corners of the past and turn them into calming bedtime tales. If you haven't already, tap subscribe and click the bell so you won't miss any of our soothing historical journeys. Tonight's topic is simple but essential: why it sucked to be a cowboy in the Wild West. We won't glamorise gunfights or glittering legends. Instead, we'll drift through the real dusty hardships of daily camp life, the isolation of endless trails, and the unrelenting labour that wore down even the toughest riders. Think of this as a gentle, unhurried exploration. No sudden jolts, no sensationalism, just steady narration designed to help you relax. When you're ready, settle in as we begin. Segment 1, Daily Life on the Open Range. Imagine the world before colour sharpens, a slate-blue half-light where horizon and sky mingle without distinct edge. The prairie breathes in hushed intervals. Somewhere a solitary cricket continues its lingering night song. A faint ribbon of wood smoke unfurls from the campfire's dying embers, carrying the smell of charred pion and yesterday's fatback bacon. In this muted moment, you stand beside a low canvas wall tent, its seams darkened by dew, its ropes humming faintly like distant cello strings in the pre-dawn breeze. Inside the tent, a single cowboy stirs. His name scarcely matters. In bunkhouse ledgers he might be noted simply as Luke, good with horses. He shifts under a coarse grey blanket woven thick enough to scratch at bare skin. The blanket's weight is both comfort and burden, trapping the warmth of a body that has slept only in snatches. 2 hours on guard over the herd, then 2 hours rest, then back again. With a resigned breath he sits upright. The tent flaps rustle, letting in a breath of chilled air that carries tiny crystals of frost. Rising rituals. Outside, the morning chores commence with almost ceremonial quiet. First comes the soft groan of a water bucket lowering into the shallow creek. The creek's surface is smooth and opaque, mirroring the paling stars. Water is hauled to the blackened coffee pot resting crookedly on glowing coals. When liquid meets iron, it hisses. A brief, intimate sound soon swallowed by stillness once more. Luke tends to his boots next. He turns each one upside down, shaking out last night's accumulation of dust and the occasional curious scorpion. With numb fingers he winds a strip of cloth around each foot. Socks are a luxury rarely afforded, but cloth keeps skin from chafing raw against stiff leather. The boots themselves smell of creosote and sweat-cured hide. Pulling them on requires practiced patience. The leather has frozen just a shade stiff overnight. Breakfast by firelight. When coffee finally bubbles, it is thick as river mud, brewed so strong that a tin spoon stands briefly upright before listing. A single ladleful into a battered cup dispenses both caffeine and comfort. The taste is bitter, but its warmth seeps through every cold-numbed fingertip. Breakfast proper consists of yesterday's biscuits revived on a flat pan, their edges crispening anew, and a flap of salt pork sputtering in its own fat. No spices, no sweetness, just sustenance. As other hands drift from tents and bedrolls, greetings are minimal. A nod, perhaps a murmured "mornin'." Voices remain hushed as though speaking too loudly might jar the fragile peace. Each man moves with deliberate economy. Energy must be conserved for the long hours ahead. Saddling up. Horses stand tethered in a shadowy grove of cottonwoods, their breath visible in soft clouds. Saddling is a ritual of small sounds. The dull thud of a blanket over a bay's back, the dry rasp of leather cinch drawn snug, the metallic click of a bit settling into accustomed teeth. Luke checks each strap twice, then runs gloved fingers along the flank to soothe any twitch of protest. A well-secured saddle can spare a day of pain. A hasty one can spell disaster miles from camp. The herd awakens. Beyond camp, a sea of longhorn cattle shifts restlessly, murmuring with low, almost conversational moos. Hooves clop over frozen ground, tails flick in half-dreaming irritation at invisible flies. Two night herders guide the mass with gentle whistles, steering steers towards sparse patches of grass while dawn gathers strength. Somewhere a lone calf bawls, seeking its mother. The sound is mournful yet strangely reassuring, evidence of life in an immense silence. Trail in motion. Once daylight crowns the horizon, the world quickens. Riders fan out, their silhouettes crisp against a wash of pale gold. Dust rises in gentle plumes under hundreds of hooves. Luke rides drag today, a position at the rear of the herd where powder-fine soil lifts with every step to coat skin, hair and eyelashes. The taste of earth becomes an almost constant companion. Dry, mineral, faintly metallic. Hours stretch elastic. The trail itself is nothing more than an impression through grass and sagebrush, marked occasionally by the bleached bones of an animal that failed to keep pace. Conversation, if it happens at all, is soft and measured. More often there is only the rhythmic clink of spurs, the steady clop of hooves, and the distant croon of a led rider singing in a lilting baritone. Trail songs are simple, often repetitive, a soothing cadence meant for cattle as much as men. Whoopee-tee-you, he hums, the syllables blending with the muffled thunder of the herd. By noon, the prairie sun burns white and relentless. Dust that clung damp to boots earlier now lifts in shimmering curtains, transforming distance into mirage. Sweat trickles beneath Luke's faded denim shirt, leaving salt crusts at collar and cuff. Water is rationed. Each man carries a canteen whose contents must last until evening. Instead of drinking freely, they rinse mouths and swallow sparingly, learning to crave nothing, expect little. Occasionally a storm front appears, billowing towers of slate and pewter that rise like distant mountains. Lightning splits sky and plain alike, delivering sudden violence. Horses rear, cattle bunch in panic, and riders scatter to quell a stampede before it gains deadly momentum. In those tense moments, Luke's heartbeat might hammer, yet outwardly his voice remains low and steady, coaxing rather than commanding. Panic here can be fatal. Calm is the only currency. Meals on the move. Come mid-afternoon, a second meal is taken from the chuck wagon. Hardtack softened in blackstrap molasses, perhaps a strip of jerked beef as tough as rawhide. Beans, if the cook's stores allow, simmer quietly in a cast-iron pot that swings from a chain as the wagon lurches forward. The smell of pinto beans mingles unexpectedly with the sweet scent of prairie clover, creating a simple sensory harmony. Stories in soft focus. When the herd finally beds down near dusk beside a shallow river, campfire sparks spiral into a violet sky. Boots are kicked off, spurs set aside, but chaps remain on. Nighttime air can bite, and a sudden call to saddle is always possible. Around the fire, voices lift in anecdote. Tales of bronc rides gone wrong, of phantom lights seen over distant ridges, of old sweethearts left behind in Kansas towns. Laughter is muted, more exhale than guffaw, as though every man is aware sound carries for miles across open country. Luke keeps mostly silent, whittling a scrap of mesquite into a shapeless charm. Each curl of wood falls into the fire with a faint hiss. Across the flames, the trail cook hums while wiping tin plates with a strip of burlap dipped in scalding water. Pots rattle softly, grease pops, then stills. Guarding the night before. Full dark settles. The night herd begins to shift uneasily. Coyotes yip in the distance, a sound sharp yet oddly mournful. 2 riders mount up, first watch. Luke will take the second, rising again around midnight to circle the herd in lazy loops, humming the same cradle-slow tune sung by countless cowboys before him. Night riders lament, drag your spurs real slow, let the cattle dream of water where the sagebrush doesn't grow. The melody drifts, blending with the rustle of cottonwood leaves, with the slow river lap, with the almost imperceptible exhale of a million creases in the prairie's vast skin. Slipping toward a rest, Luke stretches out on his bedroll, saddle for pillow, stars for ceiling. His body throbs with a measured ache, not agony, but a dull, persistent reminder of 10 hours in the saddle. He notes the faint coppery tang of dry blood where a spur chafed his ankle, yet feels no urge to inspect it. Pain is background noise, as expected as wind. Above him, the Milky Way unspools, its pale dust lanes echoing the very dust that coats his eyelashes. In the hush, breath slows, eyelids drift half-closed. The cowboy's world is reduced to simple certainties. A warm fire fading to coals, a faithful horse cropping grass nearby, the slow heartbeat of cattle pressing together in the dark. And in this stillness, one realizes why such a life could lull even as it exhausted. Monotony becomes rhythm, hardship becomes ritual, and the prairie's vast emptiness cradles mind and body alike. Yet beneath that gentle rocking motion lies the truth. Tomorrow will bring the same dust, the same thirst, the same endless horizon seemingly no closer by nightfall. As you lie wherever you are, in a bed softer than any bunkhouse tick, under a roof tighter than any trail tent, let the cadence of hooves and quiet lullabies drift through you. Allow your breathing to match Luke's. Slow inhale, slower exhale, each cycle eroding the sharp edges of conscious thought like wind smoothing sandstone buttes. When next we speak, we will follow a single cowboy's life story, from hopeful greenhorn to weather-carved veteran, tracing in gentle detail the subtle ways ambition bends under the weight of reality. For now, rest with the knowledge of this singular day, repeated 1,000 times across 1,000 dusty miles, and know that sleep, unlike tomorrow's dawn, requires no labour at all. Night still lingers in a soft indigo hush, but the campfire's embers have cooled to a dull carnelian glow. In the hush between waking dreams and conscious thought, imagine yourself lifting a single thread from the tapestry of frontier life, following it patiently through knots of years and miles. The thread belongs to Thomas Trace McAllister, one trail hand among thousands, yet a man whose quiet endurance mirrors the hidden currents of the cattle frontier. His story will carry us unhurriedly from a hopeful first ride all the way to a winter cabin where snow muffles every hoofbeat. Let each scene unfold with the steady cadence of a rocking chair's motion, predictable and soothing, yet always edging gently forward. Beginnings in river fog country trace drew first breath on a small hard-scrabble farm near the Missouri River in the spring of 1855. The river valley that year smelled of wet cedar and churned silt. Crickets sang in the reeds while paddle-wheel steamers coughed up clouds of coal smoke on distant channels. His father, Angus, raised corn that rarely reached knee-high before summer drought shriveled it. His mother, Mercy, patched garments until fabric grew thin as mothwing. Yet Trace's childhood memories were not of want so much as of anticipation, the sense that just beyond the horizon's gentle roll, a different life waited. One hazy August morning in 1871, at 16 and lean as a willow switch, he stood barefoot on the cabin's split-log threshold. A neighbour's newspaper, 2 weeks old, carried a South Texas cattle outfit's notice. Wanting hardy youths of sober habit for trail work to Abilene, Wagyu $25 per month, beef and beans included. Trace traced the printed words with hesitant fingertip, then folded the paper twice and tucked it into his shirt, breath held as though the act alone might seal destiny. By first frost he was a passenger atop a freight wagon bound southwest, one canvas sack his only luggage. Baptism by dust and blister. The outfit he joined turned out to be the Turner and Boyd spread on the Nueces River. Its bunkhouse smelled of rawhide, axle grease and chili stew forever simmering. The cook, a stolid mescalero called Santiago, sized up the newcomer's hands, calluses thin, knuckles unscarred, and prescribed a month of corral duty before he would see the open range. Trace spent daylight hours mending fence wire, doctoring cracked hoof walls with pine tar, and learning the peculiar dialect of older hands. Hoopy for saddle blanket, paint for a spotted horse, lean toe for a makeshift shelter of mesquite limbs. One moonless night a restless remuda broke gate. Panicked ponies churned the coral into red mud. Trace, roused from bunk, fumbled barefoot through sludge until dawn, his body streaked with manure and sweat. The older cowboys teased him at breakfast. Little rooster lost his spurs, yet an approving nod from trail boss Eli Boyd hinted at grudging respect. Calluses thickened, knuckles split and healed. First drive north. In May 1872, Trace rode drag on a 2,000-head herd destined for the rails at Abilene. The lead steer wore a bell that clanged faintly with each step, a measured tempo undergirding endless hours. Dust rose in pale curtains, settling onto skin until every wrinkle filled with silt. Nights, he coiled his lariat into a pillow and stared up at prairie constellations so bright they seemed to hum. A week out, the herd approached the Brazos River swollen with spring freshet. Lightning pulsed in distant anvil clouds. The crossing began at dawn. 30 yards from shore, a calf vanished beneath brown surge, its bleat severed mid-sound. Trace, chest deep and legs numb, groped beneath the current and caught a tangled ear tag. He hauled the bawling creature onto a drift log, breathing slow to quell the tremor in his limbs. Later, around the fire, Eli Boyd murmured, "Not many greenhorns would have bothered." Praise was sparse on the trail. Those few words warmed Trace longer than any blanket. Letters, home, hope in ink. At the Abbott Depot, cattle sold briskly, $30 a head, and each hand received 2 months' wages rolled in brown paper and tied with twine. Trace walked to the cottonwood-shaded post office and bought a single sheet of lined stationery. His handwriting, careful as a surveyor's, carried news eastward. October 9th, 1872, Abilene, Kansas. Dear Ma, I have seen a plain so wide it seemed the sea, but silent. Nights I think of the river fog back home and of your cornbread. Do not fret over my safety. Work is hard but honest. I will send more once winter wages come. Yours always, Tom. Mercy read the letter aloud by lamplight, tracing each phrase with worn thumb. In her mind she pictured her boy tall under unbroken sky, unaware of the miles that would widen like slow-moving water between them. Trace kept a small composition book beneath his coat, protected by oiled cloth. On nights when wind screamed like a saw through cottonwood snags, he wrote by firelight, "The north wind has a voice old as sin. It hollers through bone until bone answers." This work pares a man down chip by chip. Yet the stars still shine cold and clean above the haze, and maybe that is enough. The lines were not poetry exactly, more witness marks, etched softly so memory might not erode them entirely. Railroad shadows and barbed wire lines. Change swept the frontier without fanfare, like dusk diffusing pink into blue. By 1883, iron rails reached Dodge City and pushed farther each season. Herds that once traced months-long corridors now travelled mere weeks before clanking gates swallowed them. Trace watched locomotives hiss and sputter at sidings, steel wheels bright against tamped gravel. The engine smell, a hot cocktail of coal and oil, felt alien beside the sage and sun-baked scat of the open range. Even the grass itself learned new boundaries. Barbed wire, introduced scarcely a decade prior, laced valleys and creek draws. Its twisted spurs snagged cattle hides and human shirt sleeves alike. One twilight ride, Trace's mount spooked at a rattler. Horse and rider crashed through a strand of new fencing. Wire licked across Trace's forearm, leaving 3 tidy crimson beads that later healed into white lattice scars. He rubbed them absent-mindedly thereafter, the way one might finger worry beads. Brief cities of noise and neon towns along the tracks blossomed overnight. Lamar, Trinidad, La Junta, each a scatter of boardwalk saloons, bathhouses and cafes boasting oyster stew 400 miles from any tidal water. Drives ended here now, not in Kansas. Payout day turned dirt streets into whirlpools of jubilation. Fiddles screeching, corks popping, boots scuffing boards slick with spilled beer. On one such evening, Trace stood outside the Morning Star dance hall, hat in hand, studying his reflection in a lamplit window. Dust ghosts rimmed every crease of his clothing. Fine lines radiated from his eyes like cracks in river ice. He realized he no longer looked the boy from Missouri. Some quieter, sterner version stared back. Inside, he danced 2 reels with a girl named Lila, who wore a calico skirt patterned with tiny blue bonnets. Her laughter was high and sudden, like water over pebbles. Later they shared a slice of coconut layer cake in a cafe that smelled faintly of kerosene and vanilla. She asked if he might stay through winter. He shook his head slowly, palm warm over her gloved fingers. The herd would push south at first snow. When dawn pinked the eastern sky, he tipped his hat and rode out, hoofbeats muffled by new powder. Years later, he could still recall the cake's surprising sweetness. The great dye-up hardship sharpened again in the winter of 1886–87, the notorious Great Dye-Up. Early snow blanketed the plains, then thawed, then refroze beneath thick crust. Cattle, noses bleeding from trying to punch through ice, starved where they stood. Trace, now trail boss of a mixed herd owned by distant Chicago investors, rode fence lines seeking any break that might let steers drift toward lower forage. He found carcasses instead, hulking brown mounds half covered in drifted white. The air smelled of iron and rot, but he noted only the silence. No lowing, no hoof scrape, just wind skimming crust with brittle hiss. He and 2 hands dug trenches through snow so the remaining herd could reach cottonwood breaks along the Arkansas River, where grass still poked green. They led surviving cattle single file, heads low, breath pluming. 20 miles took 3 days. Nights they built fires from cottonwood deadfall, sparks spiralling into frozen starlight. Trace spoke little. Each lost steer felt like a chisel stroke against his ledgers, and against some inner pillar he could not name. A fork in the dust. By spring only half the original stock survived. Investors sent curt telegrams. Reduce staff. Liquidate horses as needed. Trace dismissed 3 young wranglers with regret heavy in his voice and coin purse alike, dividing his own savings so each left with fair home. He kept Obie Jones, older, reliable, a segundo, but the crew's laughter thinned, like birds gone south before a storm even ends. One amber evening, Oba brewed chicory in a dented pot. He asked, voice low, "Boss, you ever think of leaving the long trail?" Trace studied the horizon, the way sun bronze plated the grass tips, the way twilight bled upward in slow veins, and answered only, "Sometimes the trail leaves us first." Homestead years. In 1890, at 35, Trace filed a homestead claim on 160 acres of rolling short grass south of Reeton Pass. He built a low sod house faced with pine planks, roof layered in tar paper and dirt. Barley and winter wheat replaced longhorns in his routine. Yet some habits proved immovable. Quiet visitor, quiet farewell. Mercy never made the journey west, but in October 1894, Trace opened a telegram edged in black. Mother Mercy McAllister passed peacefully this morning. Stop. Burial Friday, Riverside Hill. Stop. He read it twice, folded it thrice, slid it into his breast pocket and walked to the pasture fence. There, beneath a lone juniper, he removed his hat and listened to wind murmur through grass tall as a man's knee. Tears did not come. Instead, a slow exhalation, as though some tension in his spine had finally given way. He planted a sapling cottonwood beside the juniper that week, a living letter back east, roots reaching steadily toward the same deep aquifer that fed Mercy's river. Final trails. Work lightened as years eased past. Trace hired neighbour boys to milk cows, split wood, repair harness. He paid in nickels, jokes, and stories of nights when thunder rolled like cannon fire, and 100 head stampeded under a moon so bright the very dust glowed. The boys listened wide-eyed. To them, barbed wire and windmills were commonplace, while open range sounded mythic. One December evening in 1899, snow settling thick on roof and window ledge, Trace moved slower than usual, joints creaking like wagon tongues in need of grease. He set bread dough to rise near the stove, checked damper setting, and sat in his rocking chair facing west. The direction trail drives always ended. Outside, coyotes sang a wavering hymn. He closed his eyes and hummed along, low and tuneless. A neighbour found him at dawn, chair stilled mid-rock, bread dough now risen and airy on the hearth. Trace's hat hung on a peg. Worn boots rested neatly beside the bedroll he still preferred to any feather mattress. In his lap lay the composition book, last entry brief. Wind steady from north. Fire crackles soft. Stars hidden but surely present. They buried him on a knoll overlooking the homestead fields. Fields that, come spring, would green with barley he himself had seeded. Obie Jones, slowed by age yet voice still resonant, sang, "Swing low," as snowflakes the size of silver dollars drifted through his baritone. Quiet footprints, lasting impressions. Trace McAllister's life was neither infamous nor celebrated. No dime novels carried his name. Yet inscribed within his 44 years lies a distilled portrait of the cowboy era itself. Youthful hope, boots scuffed into endurance, camaraderie forged in dust, relentless adaptation to forces, railroad, wire, weather, far beyond any rider's reins. His trail was long, sometimes lonely, often monotonous, but laced with small mercies, a saved calf, a slice of coconut cake, a mother's quilt warming bunker nights. As you inhale now, consider that every pulse of your heart echoes some hoofbeat from long ago. Every quiet exhale might carry dust lifted once from the Chisholm Trail. Let Trace's story settle like soft snow across the mind, cooling, muting, smoothing edges. In the stillness, you may sense an undercurrent of resilience, patient and strong as prairie roots gripping deep soil. When next we gather, we will step away from individual memory and into the collective lore of the cowboy community. Songs, tall tales, half-believed omens, and the humble artifacts archaeologists still uncover beneath strata of sun-baked sediment. Until then, rest within the gentle cadence of Trace's long ride, hoof after hoof, breath after breath, stretching onward through a frontier that fades now only in distance, never in quiet significance. The campfires burned low again, its last orange eyes blinking sleepily beneath a shell of white ash. Beyond its radius, the prairie rolls away in soft graphite shadows, and the night wind plucks at the dying flames as if testing the strings of an old guitar. Listen closely. There is a hush so wide you can almost hear history itself breathing. In that waiting silence, the culture of the cowboy takes shape as something half sung, half remembered, not written in ledgers or stitched into flags, but carried on melodies heard once and hummed forever, on talismans braided into horsehair hatbands, on small iron fragments buried where chuck wagons once rattled. Tonight we drift unhurriedly through that intangible frontier. We will step from the glow of shared stories into the dim corridors of collective superstition, then kneel quietly beside archaeologists as they lift rusted spurs from the soil. Each artifact, musical, mythical, or material, offers a muted testimony to lives that seldom paused long enough to write themselves down. Allow each discovery to surface gently, like faint constellations finding prominence as your eyes adjust to darkness. The lullaby of the long drive. Begin with the music, for that is what most often lingered after the day's dust settled. Picture a solitary rider easing his pony into a slow walk at the herd's edge. The cattle have bedded down, flanks rising and falling in syncopated calm. Above, the sky is a black ocean stippled with impossible stars. The rider shifts in his saddle and lets a tune slip past his lips, not loud, not polished, but steady. Perhaps it is Red River Valley, sung in a soft baritone too gentle to alarm skittish steers. Come and sit by my side if you love me, do not hasten to bid me adieu. Each vowel rides the night air like a firefly glowing briefly before fading. The cattle, familiar with this ritual, lower their heads and surrender to drowsiness. The song is part lullaby, part protective charm. Its gentle repetition convinces nervous animals that all is well. For the rider, too, the melody is a lifeline, a way to anchor his thoughts amid the infinite dark. Scholars, combing through frontier memoirs, count hundreds of such trail songs. Some were imported from Scottish ballads, others borrowed from Mexican corridos, still others invented on the spot to fit the rhythm of hoofbeats. The lyrics mutated with each drift. Verses dropped, choruses grafted, meaning dissolved until only cadence remained. Yet across that shifting landscape, one element persisted: slow, rhythmic repetition, soothing as a rocking cradle. Imagine now the layered soundscape of a full drive at dusk. 3 riders take in separate flanks, each humming their own tune. One voice tumbles through Old Chisholm Trail, another croons Get Along Little Doggies, while a third whistles La Sandunga, the notes rising like sparks above cottonwood branches. The melodies weave in and out of one another, never clashing. Each finds its own current in the night's wide river. When archaeologists uncovered a cracked tin whistle near an old trail camp along Wolf Creek, they found its mouthpiece worn to a paper-thin edge. Exhaling through the whistle produced a plaintive, reedy cry. The ghost of countless evenings when a lonely wrangler filled that whistle with his breath, shaping silence into fragile comfort. The whistle now lies in a museum drawer, but its echo lingers here if you allow imagination to lift it from the dust. Omens and small safeguards, music soothed, but superstition guarded. Life on the open range balanced endlessly on luck, weather, river depth, the skittishness of longhorns, so cowboys cultivated rituals to tilt fortune in their favour. Some tied a coin minted in their birth year to the inside of a vest pocket, believing it would guide them back to hearth and kin. Others refused to place a hat on a bed, certain it invited bad dreams, or worse, a stampede. One of the most persistent charms was a short braid of horsehair, usually black or sorrel, tucked beneath a saddle's cinch ring. The braid's purpose varied with the teller, to ensure a smooth river crossing, to prevent a thrown shoe to ward off rattlesnakes. Modern excavations at abandoned line camps routinely unearth tiny horsehair knots preserved by arid soil. To the untrained eye they appear as random tangles, but unravel them carefully and you see deliberate pattern. 3 strands woven left over right, 7 turns, then an overhand knot, always the same. In statistical terms, the pattern's repetition defies coincidence. In cultural terms, it speaks of a shared lexicon of hope. Consider also the blue glass evil eye beads found near chuckwagon sites in Indian territory. Originally Venetian trade trinkets, they ended up along the cattle trails, strung on rawhide cords and hung from wagon bows. Cowboys swore the beads absorbed misfortune like drought-cracked earth drinks rain. Tall tales beneath torn canvas. Where superstition left gaps, stories filled them, those outrageous half-true yarns that stretched nights shorter than sleep. The teller might squat by a sizzling skillet, face greased gold by firelight, and begin, "Now this happened down on the Devil's River, summer of '78. From there the tale ambled through improbable detours, snakes big as train rails, painted ladies with hearts of granite, ghost lights drifting above mesquite thickets, but always returned to a moral Riley offered. Courage beats cunning, or maybe fortune favours the foolish." One favourite genre was the shape-shifting cowboy brag. The speaker exaggerated his own skill to absurd lengths, roping whirlwind dust, riding tornadoes bareback, shooting the stinger off a scorpion at 40 paces. Such brags served no practical end. They were verbal fireworks, bright bursts of ego that dissolved as soon as ears found sleep. Yet they also built camaraderie. By pretending to one-up each other, cowboys formed an unspoken pact that none would boast of real accomplishments, thus levelling the social plane. Some stories reached for the uncanny. Riders spoke of La Llorona, the weeping woman who wandered river banks, her lament a lure for the unwary. They whispered of spook lights, blue orbs bobbing along trail's edge, that foretold a rider's demise should they drift too near. In 1902, a field team excavating Charo Peak found a small tin badge etched crudely with the outline of a lantern. Nearby lay a broken harmonica and a skeleton still wearing worn Spanish riding boots. Whether the man chased a light or merely lost his way, the badge endures as a pressed tin punctuation mark at the end of an unfinished ghost story. Archaeology of the ordinary. To modern researchers, the true marvel of cowboy culture is not the grand legend, but the humble everyday item left behind. A square-nail horseshoe helps date a camp before 1900. A fragment of colour-flash soda bottle hints at a rare treat. Sarsaparilla purchased in Dodge and rationed sip by sip across 200 miles. Even a discarded sardine tin, its lid curled back like a sunflower petal, speaks volumes. Imported from Maine to Kansas City, loaded on a supply train, jostled on a wagon, finally opened beside a Wyoming creek. Distance measured in rust. Take, for instance, the small wrought-iron cheetah key used to cinch barbed wire tight. Found wedged in a post near the Canadian River, it bears a thumb-worn polish, exactly where fingers once leveraged tension. Adjacent soil layers hold charred mesquite chips and pocket knife whittlings, suggesting the key's owner paused for a meal midway through fencing, perhaps cursing the new wire even as he installed it. His stray tool, overlooked when the crew moved on, now crystallizes a cultural turning point, the moment open range met closed fence. There are also more intimate relics, china shards painted with cobalt forget-me-nots, likely part of a teacup hauled west by a cook's wife who spent one lonely season on the trail. A post-hole digger's headstone in Boot Hill Cemetery bears a carved image of the same flower. Whether cup and grave connect is unknowable, Yet the shared motif leads curators to arrange them side by side in exhibition, allowing visitors to craft their own narrative threads. Languages braided like rawhide culture on the frontier formed a mosaic of tongues. English dominated bunkhouse banter, but Spanish rippled through daily work, rodilla for encircling cattle, remuda for the spare horse string, chapareras shortened to chaps. Comanche loanwords drifted in from scout guides, Tazi for sunsetting, Mokwana for a place of many rivers. African-American cowboys layered spiritual hymns onto corrido rhythms, birthing hybrid melodies that later travelled east with vaudeville troupes. Archaeologists sift language clues from artifact context. A harmonica stamped Honor Hamburg, a tin of Chinese gunpowder tea labelled in Cantonese, a scrap of newsprint in German wrapped around plug tobacco. Each item suggests a voice at the fire that night. Imagine the symphony of accents, a Kentish burr swapping tall tales with a Tejano's clipped vowels, a freedman's deep drawl harmonising with a Scots-Irish lilt on Shenandoah. In those polyglot chords lay the nascent DNA of American popular music. At the Library of Congress, a wax cylinder recorded in 1905 captures former trail cook Bert Doc Nevarez, singing the lullaby a la orilla de un palmar in fractured tender Spanish. The surface crackles with static, but beneath the hiss flows a voice both weary and hopeful. Listening, you can almost smell campfire smoke clinging to canvas, feel the gentle sway of a bedroll on wagon boards. Rituals of farewell. Every culture evolves rites to confront death. Cowboys, often far from family plots, fashioned their own quick memorials. A hat placed crown down on a saddle marked the spot where a man fell. Spurs removed and hung on a mesquite branch jingled in the breeze, their soft clinks offering a kind of vigil until the earth reclaimed leather straps. When possible, comrades piled stones in a low cairn and carved initials on a cedar plank. Many such planks rotted or burned in grass fires. Stone piles endured. One excavation near Palo Duro Canyon revealed a miniature horseshoe lane atop a cairn, holes still threaded with faded blue ribbon. The metal, unlike typical steel, tested as meteorite iron, likely hammered years earlier by a blacksmith who prized its rarity. The ribbon's dye traced to a mill in Natchez. In that single object converged distance, craft and affection, a fragment fallen from space, shaped by human hands, offered back to Earth as tribute. Reflections in repetition. As we drift through these cultural echoes, notice how themes recur like gentle choruses. Repetition of melody calming restless minds, repetition of knot pattern binding luck, repetition of story motif teaching caution or courage. Even archaeology respects rhythm, stratified layers stacking one upon another, each trace repeating the cycle of lost and found. Such repetition, once merely survival strategy, now serves as lullaby for modern listeners. The mind, sensing pattern, releases its urgent grip on novelty and settles into slower pulse. Let the quiet recurrence comfort you now. The low hum of a remembered hymn, the soft clink of two spurs in gentle breeze, the faint whistle tune undulating over unseen grass. A slow diminuendo. Imagine the prairie morning creeping toward dawn once more. The sky lightens just enough to bleed stars from indigo canvas. Embers wink alive. A cook stirs beans in cast iron. Each swirl a fragrant circle. Someone hums half asleep, repeating the refrain of last night's song. You are there, yet safe in your present bed, listening as voices fade into wind. Rituals dissolve into daylight. Relics sink again beneath dust until some future curious soul unearths them. And so this segment draws to its quiet close. We have listened to songs fissuring the night, traced charms braided into leather, sifted silent objects from soil, and followed languages into chords of dawn. Next, we will lift our gaze from camp rings and cairns to the polished parlours of those who profited from the cowboy's labour. The cattle barons, railroad magnates, and newspaper editors shaping myth for distant markets. For now, rest in the knowledge that even in hardship, humans wove comfort through melody, superstition, and the small enduring relics of ordinary hands. Night still wraps the prairie in its velvet hush, but for a brief while let us lift the lamp and peer into rooms far removed from bedrolls and campfire ashes. Picture a high-ceilinged parlour 2,000 miles east of any cattle guard, its walls panelled with Honduran mahogany, its air perfumed by the faint bite of cigar smoke mingled with French cologne. Heavy drapes hush the rattle of Manhattan carriages outside. Here, beside a marble hearth, where coals glow like garnets, sits a man in tailored broadcloth, silk waistcoat gleaming faintly, boots polished to mirror sheen though they have never felt prairie dust. In his right hand he holds a slender crystal flute of champagne. In his left, a sheet of telegram paper recording the sale of 20,000 steers at $10 a head. He murmurs a soft, "Excellent," then folds the paper into his pocket. The fortune he celebrates was carved from the sinews of riders, either dozing in the chill or pacing circles round a nervous herd beneath alien constellations. Tonight we will stroll quietly through these polished corridors, observing the intertwining of distant worlds, the sweat-scented saddle and the velvet armchair, the corned beef sandwich wolfed down on a siding platform, and the 11-course dinner served beneath crystal chandeliers. We will not disturb the slumber of those still on the open range. Instead, we will contrast their rhythm with the measured tick of gilt clocks adorning boardroom mantels. By wandering both domains side by side, we reveal how wealth, myth, and power shaped the cowboy's reality, and how the cowboy, in turn, lent romance to ledgers written in ink and iron. Rails of ambition, the iron web spreads. Imagine a map unrolling across a polished oak table. Fine red lines snake outward from Chicago like arterial branches. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe pushing southwest. The Union Pacific lunging across Nebraska. The Missouri, Kansas, Texas, nicknamed the Katy, threading Oklahoma territory. Each surveyed mile means capital raised, labour hired, ties laid, iron spiked. At the hub of these lines stands a coterie of railroad presidents, men such as Charles Crocker, James J. Hill, and Collis P. Huntington, whose signatures wielded more force than cavalry regiments. They studied freight charts the way ranch foremen study cloud fronts, hunting profit where others saw distance. The railroads did more than haul cattle, they reshaped geography itself. Towns blossomed wherever a water tower and siding appeared, each christened with hopeful names: Emporia, Caldwell, Great Bend. A whistle blast meant opportunity. Saloons, stockyards, hotels, land offices. In such birth-shock towns, a cowboy might dismount from a dust-whitened horse and blink at electric lamps flickering like bottled lightning. He might trade his trail-creased pay voucher for a paper roll of coin, then pivot into a storefront glowing with polished brass spittoons and plate-glass windows advertising frock coats, latest Eastern cut. Meanwhile, board members convened in Boston or London to discuss freight rates at 2 decimal places. They spoke of ton miles and throughput capacity, rarely sparing thought for the drovers who coaxed horn-wild steers across flooded rivers so those ton miles could be counted. Yet without the rhythmic thunder of hooves, those parlours would be quieter, their ledgers leaner. The chilled revolution, packing houses of the windy city. Follow one red rail line north to Chicago's Union Stockyards, an industrial labyrinth whose scent of warm blood and creosote clung to river fog like a second skin. Here stood packing plants run by Gustavus F. Swift and Philip D. Armour, where innovation hummed louder than the endless saws. In 1875, Swift, seeking to ship dressed beef instead of live animals, commissioned a refrigerator car cooled by ice bunkers. Critics scoffed that meat would spoil long before reaching Boston. Yet one January test run arrived sweet and red. Within a decade, refrigerated trains stitched farms, ranches and urban tables into a single chilled web. The cowboy felt this shift as an echo. Drives shortened, prices squeezed, and seasonal rhythms bent towards slaughter schedules. The vast Kansas holding pens, once final stage in the drama, became mere layovers. Meanwhile, at Swift's headquarters, porcelain plates bore roast beef so tender it quivered, served to investors who had never hoisted a branding iron. Cattle barons, empires on dusty foundations. Back west, certain ranch owners amassed fiefdoms broad as European principalities. Charles Goodnight and John Adair's J.A. Ranch blanketed 1 million panhandle acres. The C.T. Ranch, financed by British investors in exchange for constructing Texas's state capital, unfurled across 3 million acres. The headquarters houses boasted imported wallpaper, rosewood pianos and guest bedrooms with monogrammed linens. Marketing the myth, dime novels and stage lights. As the economy matured, stories sprouted like tumbleweeds, eager to roll far beyond their roots. Enter the publishers, Beadle and Adams, Street and Smith, and countless imitators pumping out dime novels with lurid woodcut covers. Titles fairly hollered from newsstands: Long Jack, The Lasso King, Deadshot Dave and the Stampede of Doom. Inside, cowboys rarely sweat or worry wages. They leapt from galloping broncs to runaway stages, wielded revolvers with wizard polish, and earned kisses from schoolmarms after rescuing them from renegade Comanches. These tales found hungry audiences in factory towns, where whistle sirens marked lunch breaks. Boys in Pittsburgh's steel districts and girls in New Jersey textile mills devoured each yarn, dreaming of horizons uncluttered by smokestacks. Every copy sold meant pennies for writers, nickels for publishers, and intangible wealth for ranch owners whose brand names appeared in thrilling scenes. Free advertising disguised as fiction. Real cowboys sometimes encountered their own myth. A drover might step into a Dodge City saloon and spot a poster for a touring stage melodrama titled King of the Chisholm. The show featured an actor in spotless buckskins performing rope tricks beneath painted sagebrush flats. He would shoot blanks at papier-mâché coyotes while actresses in calico shrieked on cue. The drover, dusty hat in hand, might chuckle softly, knowing the real Chisholm smelled more of wet hide and camp coffee than cologne and footlights. Newspapers, too, played their part. Editors hungry for frontier copy hired stringers to telegraph brief dispatches. Stampede breaks herd near Medicine Lodge. 3 riders hurt, cattle lost. Lines expanded in retelling until eastern columns boasted night skies turned lurid by lightning as 10,000 longhorns roared across the plain like sea surf. Readers gasped, investors gauged risk, railroads raised shipping rates, cowboys received new orders scribbled on scrap paper and tucked into saddle horns. Speculation, a card game with real stakes. In the late 1880s, speculation fever gripped urban exchanges. Cattle futures contracts allowed brokers to bet on beef prices 6 months out, turning herds into numbers flickering across ticker tape. One morning's rumour of drought in Texas could shave cents from fjord-sourced steaks served that evening in Manhattan steakhouses. Ranchers hedged their herds, banks demanded collateral, cowboys felt tension in tightened payroll purses. Picture a Chicago trading office. Men in linen collars shouting bids beneath brass chandeliers, clerks scribbling on chalkboards, telephones buzzing like captive bees. Each shout might tug invisible reins on a cowboy easing a herd down the clear fork of the Brazos. He would not know the price shift until weeks later, when the telegraph agent in Abilene posted new figures on a bulletin board. By then, buyers with inside knowledge had pocketed gains. The drover simply accepted a lower tally and rode on. Philanthropy and facades. Yet wealth begot charity, of a sort. Some barons funded libraries in Fort Worth, opera houses in Denver, and orphanages in Cheyenne. Others endowed university chairs in animal husbandry, hoping scientific breeding would fatten profits while polishing reputations. Newspaper society pages printed guest lists for lavish charity balls, gowns shipped from Paris, orchestras imported from New Orleans, menus etched on ivory sheen card. Still, beneath the satin and staccato waltzes simmered a reality measured in blistered hands. For every library ledger inscribed with a donor's name, a far-flung cowboy laboured to keep a sick steer upright during sleet, so that donors' dividend could grow. The tension was seldom spoken aloud in parlours, but it hummed like telegraph wires in prairie wind. Letters across the divide. Sometimes the two realms touch through ink. Consider the correspondence between cattleman financier James R. Love of St. Louis and his range foreman Jessup Jess Hayes. Archives preserve over 90 letters sent between 1884 and 1891. Love's handwriting flows in aristocratic loops, peppered with phrases like endeavour to mitigate overhead and expedite drive terminus. Hayes replied in stubby block letters, blunt and polite. Sir, the Mason wagon wheel busted a spoke yestern outside Sweetwater. We patched with mesquite. River up at Pecos. We'll cross once it drops. 2 vocabularies, 1 enterprise. Reading their exchange now, one senses mutual dependence. Love's empire rests on Hayes's grit. Hayes's wages depend on Love's credit lines. Yet cultural distance remains. Love invites Hayes to visit his St. Louis townhouse. There is an excellent Turkish bath quite near, but archives show no record of Hayes travelling farther east than Kansas City. The advent of film, moving pictures, cement the legend. As the century turned, a new medium arrived. Echoes in architecture travel to Fort Worth today, and you may stroll along Exchange Avenue, where terracotta cattle heads adorn cornices of buildings erected in 1902. These ornaments celebrate the wealth cattle brought, yet their stylized horns curve upward like parentheses, enclosing a story seldom told inside tour brochures, a story of riders subsisting on beans while architects sketched facades that now draw tourists. Similarly, in Cheyenne's historic quarter stands the Grand Atlas Theatre, funded by investors flush with range profits. The ceiling fresco depicts muses holding garlands of wheat and horns of plenty, symbols of agricultural bounty. No lariat or saddle appears. Cultural memory selected harvest abundance, not the lean seasons preceding it. Quiet reckonings. Consider now a late-night scene in February 1895 within a Boston club's billiard room. Frost feathers the window panes. 2 cattle loan bankers, waistcoats snug around winter girth, lean over a mahogany table studying foreclosure notices. They debate whether to seize collateral from a struggling Texas ranch or extend credit one more season. Their voices remain calm, almost dispassionate. Miles away, that rancher's foreman checks windbreaks. Worried calves will smother in drifting snow. The bankers decide to foreclose. They pocket the notices, chalk their cues, and resume a leisurely game. Back on the ranch, news arrives by courier in March. The foreman reads the letter, folds it, and stares toward a line of cedar posts half buried in white. He whistles softly, a tune borrowed from some forgotten lullaby, and returns to shovel a path for the hay sled. Seasons allow no pause for lament. Calves must eat regardless of ledgers. A measured continuum. Throughout this segment we have toggled between distant vantage points, between the hush of plush carpets and the grit of sage under boot, between coin-clink luncheons at the Palmer House and tin-plate beans at a wagon tailgate. Yet the line connecting these worlds is unbroken, like steel rail welded end-to-end across prairie seas. Cowboys, barons, brokers and readers of dime novels occupied different stations along that line, each affecting the other's fortunes in slow, intricate pulses. As you breathe slowly now, sense that subtle web of connection weaving even into the present. The price of a steak at your local market hints at investment decisions made far away. The romance of a sunset silhouette riding fence owes something to a 19th century illustrator etching speedy lines for a New York magazine. Complexity woven quietly can be strangely calming. Recognizing how no action stands alone allows the mind to release its tight clutch on individual worries. A gentle return. Let us dim the lights in those parlours and step outside into night air once more. Snow muffles cobblestone clatter. Smoke stacks drift upward in lazy plumes. Then shift your gaze westward across a continent until city glow recedes, and a thin campfire flickers beneath infinite sky. Hear the distant nightclub piano echo for a heartbeat, then yield to coyote yips. Two realms, one night. Rest in that duality. Recognize that wealth can glitter yet remain brittle. Labour can chafe but also fortify spirit. The cowboy's dust and the financier's ink, both, in their own ways, draw lines across shared history. Allow this reflection to settle like soft silt at river bottom, smoothing turbulent currents of thought. When next we gather, we will leave parlours and boardrooms behind and accompany the cattle frontier toward its twilight. Barbed wire tightening, homesteaders arriving, new technologies humming, the old rhythms shifting beneath boot soles. In that epilogue we'll quietly compare then and now, hardship and comfort, restlessness and repose. Until that time, breathe evenly, feel the gentle weight of blankets or quiet air, and let the measured pulse of distant iron wheels slow your thoughts towards sleep. A first faint glow spreads across the horizon, yet this dawn feels different. Less like a promise, more like a hush before final curtains fall. Imagine standing on a low ridge in western Oklahoma in the spring of 1904. The grass underfoot is still damp from night dew, and the new sun paints fence posts in a soft amber wash. But where once your gaze could travel miles without meeting obstacle, strands of silvery barbed wire now glint in the gathering light, slicing the prairie into neat rectangles. Farther out, steam from a gasoline-powered tractor rises in gentle curls. The frontier, once fluid as wind, has begun to crystallize into parcels, deeds, and timetables. In this segment we will meander, unhurried, reflective, through the final pages of the cattle frontier. We will witness how technology, policy, and population converge to close free-ranging horizons, how the cowboy adjusted, resisted, or simply drifted away, and how memory swiftly turned hardship into romance. Let each transformation unfurl like a slow river bend, inevitable, steady, and strangely tranquil once you surrender to its pace. Barbed wire draws its lines. Begin with the fence itself. Joseph Glidden's 1874 patent, little more than 2 twisted wires studded with short, sharp burrs. At first, cattlemen scoffed. Surely no thin wire could restrain a 500-pound longhorn accustomed to roaming hundreds of unfenced miles. Yet economies of scale prevailed. By the early 1880s, factories in Illinois and Massachusetts churned out miles of barbed wire every day, shipping coils west on the very railroads cowboys used to deliver herds. Settlers eager to protect crops and waterholes bought wire by the wagon load, stretching it from Bois d'Arc post to Cedar post, until entire valleys took on the grid of a chessboard. The effect on open-range grazing was immediate and profound. Drives encountered new barriers where none had existed weeks prior. Trail bosses who once navigated only rivers and ridges now poured over rumour, who fenced which gulch, whose gate might remain unlocked, where a new law against fence cutting carried jail time. Cowboys rode night guard not just against stampedes but against wire flash in moonlight. The old practice of drifting cattle toward fresh grass became a fraught negotiation with unseen homesteaders. Some resisted. Fence-cutting wars flared briefly in Texas and New Mexico. Under cover of darkness, masked riders, often cowboys laid off as herds dwindled, slipped along new fences and sliced them clean. Posts toppled, wire coiled into snarls. Newspapers labelled them night riders. Yet each act of sabotage prompted stronger laws, heavier patrols, firmer resolve. In the end, the wire stayed. The riders moved on, homesteaders and new rhythms of the soil. Next came people, families in weather-stained wagons following promises printed on government posters. Free land, 160 acres. Good rainfall. They stake claims under the Homestead Act of 1862 and later under the 1904 Enlarged Homestead Act aimed at semi-arid lands. Sod houses sprouted where once only prairie dogs tunnelled. Soon windmills clacked rhythmically, metal veins creaking as they drew water from deep Ogallala aquifers. Wheat fields replaced buffalo grass. Rows of young cottonwoods marked boundaries. On Saturdays, you could stand outside a new clappered church and hear hymns floating across former buffalo wallows. Bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. The cowboy, solitary by vocation, now found his horizon dotted with smoke columns from cook stoves and school chimneys. Trail songs faded beneath the thrum of grist mills and the clatter of cultivators. Some drovers married homesteader daughters, trading bedroll for feather ticks, salted pork for Sunday pot roast. Others felt penned by the very fences they once detoured and drifted farther west or north, chasing open spaces that receded like mirages, technologies of compression, telephone, tractor, trolley. While wire and settlers altered landscape, new inventions compressed time and distance. Telephones arrived in county seats, stringing conversations across miles of pole lines. A ranch foreman could now call the rail agent to confirm car availability instead of sending a rider on a 2-day round trip. Gasoline tractors, though still temperamental, ploughed fields faster than teams of mules, turning prairie sod into furrowed order. Electric street trolleys hummed in burgeoning cattle towns, Fort Worth, Amarillo, carrying passengers who paid a nickel to glide past storefronts where velvet-draped windows displayed Stetsons marketed as authentic cowboy hats, though fewer working cowboys walk those streets each year. The subtle economics of decline. As free grass dwindled, so did profit margins. Ranchers, once flush with income from open-range drives, faced rising costs. Railroads, now holding near-monopoly power, raised freight tariffs. Packing houses, benefiting from chilling technology, squeezed purchase prices, citing market gluts. Some ranchers diversified into sheep or wheat, others folded entirely, selling land to speculators who subdivided into farms. Economic textbooks might label this market correction, but on the ground it felt like slow suffocation. Grasslands inhaling less each season, exhaling dust when over-ploughed soil caught a hard wind. Voices of adaptation. Yet humans, like prairie plants, adapt. Meet Clara Bell Rogers, daughter of a Kansas trail boss turned fenceline rancher. In an interview recorded in 1932 by the Federal Writers Project, she recalled learning to mend wire at 15. Papa said if I could braid my hair, I could splice fence. So he showed me the twist and wrap knot, and by summer I was riding line with a canvas pouch of staples and a little hatchet hammer. We worked sunrise to noon, broke for beans and cornbread, then rode till dusk singing whatever hymn was stuck in our heads. Clara later operated a telephone exchange from a converted sod shed, routing calls between ranches and the railroad depot. Her voice, calm and precise, became as integral to cattle commerce as any trail boss's yell. Meanwhile, former night rider Hank Meacham accepted work as a state brand inspector, using his intimate knowledge of open range to trace stolen stock across newly fenced counties. He patrolled railheads by bicycle, clipboard in one hand, comparing earmarks against shipping manifests. The outlaw had become administrator, channeling restless energy into quiet order. Myth hardens as reality softens. The less the public saw of real cowboys, the more it craved their image. Wild West shows, Buffalo Bill's chief among them, reached peak popularity around 1900, performing in New York, London, Paris. Audiences thrilled at stagecoach hold-ups, trick roping and horseback marksmanship. Cowboys in these arenas wore spotless buckskins and crimson scarves. Their broncs bucked within orderly arenas, never into thorn thickets. Every cheer, every newspaper review solidified the legend even as the working cowboy became a rarer sight on the plains. Motion pictures soon joined in. Actors like Bronco Billy Anderson and Tom Mix galloped across California hillsides masquerading as Texas or Wyoming. Film crews sprayed dust with hoses to keep it from obscuring camera lenses. They shot scenes in midday for bright exposure, though real cowboys often worked pre-dawn and dusk to spare cattle heat stress. The myth, once nurtured by dime novels, now flickered at 24 frames per second. Cattle steel and cotton clouds. By 1905, many ranchers fully transitioned to what contemporaries called cattle steel, the enclosed feedlot. Pens of graded shorthorns replaced free-roaming longhorn mixes. Feed came by rail, compressed alfalfa, beet pulp, Milo maize. Nutrition science promised faster weight gain, predictable output. Cowboys left the saddle to shovel silage and operate crank-separated creamers. Some took pride in these efficiencies, others stared at rows of tin troughs and longed for the slow-breathing hush of a trail night. Meanwhile, high above, clouds thickened with cottony promise. Scientific journals spoke of dryland farming, a belief that deep ploughing created a dust mulch to capture scarce water. Homesteaders expanded wheat acreage beyond natural rainfall zones. For a time, yields impressed, but each overturned root tuft surrendered its anchor, and when the 1910s brought a string of dry summers, topsoil began to drift. A pause. Beside abandoned corrals. Picture now an aging cowboy named Silas Ward, once a swing rider on the Goodnight-loving trail, standing beside a weather-grade corral near Palo Duro Canyon in 1912. The last yearling shipped out months ago. Rails on the loading chute creak when wind pushes. Silas rests his calloused hand on a warped cedar plank. Through a gap he sees weeds reclaiming the manure-packed ground. He listens, half expecting to hear faint longhorn low, or saddle leather squeak, or some ghostly echo of Obie Jones's lullaby. But only locust wings rattle. He breathes steady. The emptiness is not harsh. It carries a certain peace, akin to a field lying fallow. Silas is tired in a way that invites rest, not resentment. He turns, adjusting the brim of a hat half its original felt weight, and walks toward a Model T truck idling on the road. He will drive into town to discuss installing windmill pumps on his cousin's farm. Progress hums under the hood, carrying him forward even as his mind drifts to distant campfires. Weather shifts, dust rises. 17 years later, in 1929, the sky above the Texas Panhandle dims at noon, a wall of dust rolling like a slow-motion tidal wave. Homesteaders rush to tack wet sheets over windows. Inside, a wool coat hung on a hook bears a tag. Circle Bar Ranch, 1898, Range Boss. The coat is threadbare, used only for chores now, but the embroidered brand stands out. A child asks, voice muffled by bandana, "Pa, did you ride cows?" The father, once that very range boss, smiles behind his own dust mask. He tries to answer, but his words vanish in the hiss of wind carrying the past into the next county. Time folds like that. Memories borne aloft, settling miles away in altered form. A gentle accounting. By the mid-1930s, federal grazing leases formalized public land ranching. Private pastures dominated lowlands, and the archetype of the long drive cowboy became a chapter in grade school readers. Yet nothing truly disappears. Songs persisted, handed down with banjo chords on front porches. Old saddles hung on restaurant walls. Museums displayed lariats labelled circa 1880, though no one could say for certain who once threw them. Archaeologists digging beneath former chuck wagon sites near the Canadian River now sift through layers representing this twilight era. Rusted Prince Albert tobacco tins, wire-cut sardine lids, a Bakelite telephone mouthpiece broken clean in half. Each artefact whispers of transition, leather yielding to plastic, campfire to kerosene lantern, saddle to steering wheel. Revisiting the dream and reality recall our opening promise to compare legend and life. The legend rides on, as vigorous as ever. Songs on modern radio praising wide-open spaces, theme park nightly rodeos, cologne adverts featuring sunlit silhouettes against crimson sky. Yet the lived reality we've traced tonight reveals monotony, adaptation, fatigue, and resilience. Not glamorous, but quietly noble. Even so, legend does serve a purpose. It reminds us of courage, of vistas beyond our cubicles, of a pace set by hoofbeats rather than notification pings, and reality offers its own comfort, a testament that humans can bend without breaking, can splice wire and hopes with equal skill, can find lullabies in hymns hummed while swinging a post-hole digger. Rest in the ruins and in renewal. Take one last imaginal stroll across the frontier's fading margins. The sun dips behind a distant mesa. Wire silhouettes glow blood orange before dimming into dusk. A meadowlark trills, perched on a rusted T-post, its notes clear and piercing. Close by, a modern stock tank reflects the first stars of evening, points of light winking through water ripples made by a single dragonfly's touch. Breathe. Feel how the mind settles when acknowledging endings as natural as nightfall. The open range closed, yet grass still waves. The cowboy era waned, yet people still guide cattle, now from pickups and ATVs. Change is relentless, but so is continuity. Let that continuity cradle you. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine distant coyote calls blending with the faint hum of a telephone line in the wind, two eras conversing in soft cadences. When next we speak, in our conclusion, we will gather these strands: daily toil, individual journey, cultural echo, economic tension, and twilight transformation, into one final gentle reflection before bidding the frontier good night. Until then, sleep easy, knowing that every ending carries within it the quiet seed of what comes next. The embers of our long narrative now lie faint beneath a thin lattice of grey ash. Imagine that you, still nestled comfortably wherever you rest, tilt forward and lay a slender juniper branch across those smouldering coals. The wood hisses once, then settles into a slow, even burn, releasing a fragrant ribbon of smoke that drifts toward the sky, like a sigh too gentle to stir the night. We linger beside that small flame only long enough to gather our thoughts, for the hour grows late, and the best stories know when to soften their voices and glide into silence. Tonight we have ridden a vast circuit across time and terrain. We have risen before dawn with a solitary cowhand named Luke, boots numb against frosted ground, coffee thick as river mud warming his fingers. We have trailed behind Thomas Trace McAllister as years bent his shoulders and seamed his palms with honest callous. We have hummed along with lullabies that braided Spanish, Scots, Irish and spiritual chords into twilight harmonies. We have slipped into mahogany parlours where fortunes clinked inside crystal glasses and rail magnates sketched futures on linen napkins. We have watched barbed wire glitter in first light, closing open spaces into rectangles of deeds and debts. And through each scene we paced ourselves deliberately, careful never to wake the mind with sharp gestures or harsh alarms. Now, in this concluding hush, we will not so much recap as we will weave everything into a single gentle cloth, soft enough to rest your cheek upon, yet strong enough to cradle truths, hardship and hope, endurance and change, myth and memory. Let each thread glide through your thoughts the way a slow breeze slides through buffalo grass, hardly bending a blade. The rhythm beneath the dust. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture the cadence that underlay each segment. It is the pulse of hoofbeats, steady, deliberate, one after another across uncountable miles. Whether we examine daily chores, personal biography, communal law, economic machinery or historical twilight, that same rhythm echoed beneath. Like a lullaby's repeated refrain, it lulled restless thoughts, reminding us that even the harshest reality can become soothing when rendered as consistent pattern. The cowboy's world, stripped of dime novel dazzle, followed routines stronger than any individual will. Rise with the sun, grease the saddle, mind the herd, sing at night, repeat tomorrow. Such repetition, far from dulling the narrative, created a safe harbour for imagination to drift, unthreatened by abrupt change. And so we borrowed that rhythm for our own storytelling. Paragraphs swung like pendulums, scenes opened with the hush of dawn or the hush of dusk, dangers acknowledged but never lingered upon. From solitary breath to collective memory, Luke and Trace reminded us that every broad epoch can be traced back to a pair of lungs drawing air in the cold. Their solitary experiences, shaking scorpions from boots, mending split rails under sleet, marvelling at cottonwood saplings beside sod huts, collapsed the vastness of history into intimate, comprehensible moments. Yet those moments scaled outward. One cowboy's night song layered atop another's, and soon an entire culture could be felt thrumming along a cattle trail under constellations too ancient to name. It is easy, from modern vantage points, to imagine that daily chores vanish when their practitioners do. But listen more closely, and you will hear echoes. A modern rancher humming an old corrido while resetting a solar-powered fence charger. A prairie preschooler tracing finger across a museum spur, feeling the faint pucker of rust. Memory persists not only through grand monuments, but through tiny habits passed hand to hand like tin cups of coffee. Wealth, myth, and the lull of distance. The segment that carried us into velvet-draped drawing rooms exposed a different kind of rhythm. The tick of gold pocket watches, the scrape of fountain pen nib across ledger columns. wealth-built walls thick enough to muffle cattle balls, yet even inside those parlours the frontier was present, if only as numbers penciled beside the word steer. Money, like dust, travels farther than one expects. By observing those distant, softened realities, we found a calming counterpoint. Confronted with our own era's swirl of markets and headlines, we might recall that human systems have always been intricate, often opaque, occasionally unfair. And yet individuals persisted. Some adapted, some resisted, some quietly withdrew. Recognizing this continuum eases the sting of present uncertainty, suggesting that change is an old companion rather than a looming stranger. The gentle art of letting go. In segment 5, we walked the wire-laced prairies of the early 20th century, a place where the sun still rose in gilded splendour but fell upon tractors idling where horse herds once grazed. Fences tightened, rail tariffs climbed, and cowboy wages stagnated. Rather than lament with raised voice, we watched the long drive slip into memory the way dusk swallows the colour of cliffs. No sudden snap, just a slow wash of shadow that feels almost like relief. Silas Ward's quiet turn toward a Model T, bread dough left to rise beside cooling coals, symbolised the gentle art of letting go. It was not surrender so much as acceptance, and acceptance nourishes calm. It allows us, here and now, to breathe evenly when our minds replay personal endings. A career changed, a child grown, a home place sold. We recognise endings as threads in a fabric that remains, re-dyed, but unbroken. The present comforts, the past consoles. Imagine, then, returning from our journey to the comfort of modern bedding, to insulated walls that hush storms, to clean water springing at the twist of a tap. Contrast those luxuries with the frost-crusted blankets Luke endured, or the snow-breath nights Trace weathered in a chuck wagon seat. But resist the urge to feel guilty for comfort. Let comparison breed gratitude, not shame. Gratitude, when acknowledged softly, is a potent anaesthetic for restless thoughts. Consider your pillows. They weigh almost nothing, yet would have been prized beyond words by a trailhand whose spine met only canvas and ground. Feel the mattress enclose your body like a patient hillside, an indulgence unknown to weary foremen sleeping upright for fear of drifting cattle. Listen to the hum of distant streetlights, refrigerators, or night trains, each a descendant of the rail whistles we pictured slicing prairie night. These sounds are not intrusions. They are evidence that humanity keeps building shelters from the elements, each generation refining the craft. If you find worry nudging at the edge of consciousness, unpaid bills, tomorrow's deadlines, the uncertain climate of literal or metaphorical weather, recall how previous centuries faced thunderheads of their own, stampedes in blinding lightning, winters so cruel they earned names like die-up. Yet people endured. They patched boots, wrote letters, sang lullabies. You too will endure, armed with amenities they could not envision, and wisdom gleaned from their example. A slow fading campfire of the mind picture. Again our juniper branch, now reduced to glowing coals delicate as cardinal embers. The ember's glow will not vanish at once. It will fade gradually, and with it the silhouettes of longhorns, bunkhouses, and baronial parlours dissolve into the encompassing night. Allow this dimming to guide your own mental dimmer switch. Thoughts need not stop. They need only soften their edges, blur like distant buttes at twilight. Words as soft stirrup leathers. Before we dim the lamp entirely, let us honour the power of language itself. Phrases like imagine yourself, the rhythm of their lives, and a constant struggle have recurred intentionally, each appearance like a familiar handhold along a cliff path. Repetition soothes the linguistic mind, offering predictability amid novelty. Feel free to craft your own small mantras for wakeful nights. I am safe. Breath flows. Dawn will come. Spoken silently, they function as soft stirrup leathers, keeping you balanced while the restless horse of thought settles. A closing in gentle contrast. Now, draw one more deliberate breath. Smell in your mind's nose the mingled aromas of pignon smoke and fresh linen. Hear, in one ear, the ghostly thrum of a telegraph key, and in the other, the faint buzz of an LED clock. Past and present meet in that single moment, not in conflict, but in concord. You are heir to both, the resilience wrought in dust and the comfort wrought in circuitry. If your eyelids hover half open, let them flutter closed. If they are already sealed, know that the story beyond this sentence will continue only in dream echoes where you control the pace. Luke might tip his hat and ride into sunrise. Trace might step onto a porch fragrant with barley malt. Songs might coil upward from tin whistles buried beneath shifting red sand. They will do so quietly and courteously, honouring your rest. Final embers, final promise. At last, the juniper branch collapses into featherlight ash. The glow fades to a single pinprick reminiscent of Mars on a clear winter night. Soon, even that pinprick dims, replaced by the cool silver of starlight unfiltered by dust. Somewhere a meadowlark gives one soft call, then falls silent. The prairie, the parlour, the bunkhouse, and the museum drawer all surrender to profound hush. Carry that hush with you into sleep. Let it be a mantle lighter than any blanket, yet warmer than any fire. Should you wake before morning, remember that hush waits patiently beside you. Re-enter it by recalling the gentle sway of a herd under moonlight, or the quiet scratch of pen on 1872 stationery. In a few hours, whether at first light or well past breakfast, you will rise from your own bed. The sun will crest rooftops or tree lines. Coffee may scent the air as it did for Luke, though your brew will likely be smoother. Bills, tasks, and news alerts will clamour anew, but some part of you will still resonate with the long hum of frontier endurance. You may find shoulders loosen when traffic stalls, or breath deepen when deadlines loom. That is the quiet gift the cowboy era bestows, proof that persistence and calm can coexist with challenge. Until our next journey together, may your nights be as spacious as a starlit cattle trail, and your days as steady as a well-tempered horse. The fire is out, the story told, the horizon restful. Sleep, traveller, and let the gentle hoofbeat of history guide your dreams across plains of peace.